All right, in this tutorial, we're going to save out the slices. So once we've created our slices and we're happy with their position and location and naming, we're gonna save them out. Now let's go over to the File menu and come down and say Save for Web. And I'm actually in Finder. I need to click into Photoshop, Save for Web. And this brings up this Save for Web dialog box. And here is where we can designate each slice to be a different file type. So this is actually quite a powerful little dialog inside of here. I'm gonna zoom out just a little bit so we can see a little bit more of the site design. And then pull this up. So the Save for Web will show you all of the slices, and you can individually select a compression algorithm for each slice, which is fairly handy. Now, in this video tutorial, we don't cover the difference between the PNG, the JPEG, and the GIF. There's a mini series that you want to check out that has all the differences between the different file types that are used on the web, and you'll definitely want to check that out if you haven't already before you proceed with this. So having said that, let's go ahead and select these. So I'm going to get my slice select tool. Notice there's a slice select tool inside of this dialog box, not to be confused with the one back here. So I'll cover those up just so we don't accidentally select that. This option down here toggles the visibility of all of your slices. So I'm going to turn all my slices on, get my slice select tool, and select this top image right here. And you'll notice it kind of turns this full color where everything else is slightly faded out or has a little bit of opacity overlay over the top. So I'm going to select this. I'll come up to my presets and I'm going to make this a JPEG. I know that photographs should be JPEG, and I'm going to leave the quality right at 70. If you don't know where to put your quality slider, for the web, I would say anywhere between 60 and 80 for JPEG photographs is acceptable. 80 would probably be the upper end, whereas 60 would be the lower end. So I'm going to set this back to 70. I'll just split the difference there. And you'll notice down here inside of this dialog box, this image at a 70% compression is going to be 141K, which is going to download 27 seconds over a 56K modem. This dialog is kind of useless as well, but you can change this and say, oh, I'm going to bump up to maybe a 2 megabit line and it would take 2 seconds. 2 megs per second is slow high-speed internet in this day and age. So you can kind of ignore this little thing. You can also set up your own custom values in there, but this is going to be 141K. And if I take this slider and I crank the quality all the way down to 0, you can see now it's going to be 20K. Take it all the way up to 100, 376K. And you really can't see the difference when we're zoomed out, but if it's a live preview. So if I zoom in here nice and tight, notice at 0%, there's all these blocks and there's all of this JPEG artifacting going on. And if I crank this all the way up, you can see I'll just slowly kind of adjust it. It gets better and better and better and better. So a good rule of thumb, around 70, there's enough compression applied to where we have a relatively small file size, but we still get a nice crisp image. So now that I've set that quality for that particular slice, I'll move on and do the other slices. So I'm going to get my slice tool and let's click on this slice. And I'm also going to make sure it's set to JPEG 70, and that looks good. And you can also do multiple slices at the same time. So for the next couple, I'll show you that. I'll select this icon here, hold down Shift, and select this icon here. So they're both gray, or brown rather. They both have the brown border, which means I have them both selected. And now whatever compression I apply will be applied to both. So for these particular images, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to do these as PNG 24 and 8. A PNG 24 has a full alpha channel. You can see this is 2.7K. A PNG 8 doesn't have a full alpha channel, and this is 1.9. For these particular images, I don't need a full transparency channel. They're just going to have that background color there included. They actually don't even need any transparency at all, so I can uncheck that. And then here's where you can play around with the color slider to further compress this. Now I'm going to zoom way in so you can see this. So I'm going to zoom into this logo right here, nice and tight. And right now, PNG 8 is a 256 color image. It's an 8-bit image. And right now it's going to be using all 256 colors, but I don't need that many. So I can take this and I can half it down to 128, and there's still no noticeable change. You can take this and half it down to 64, and notice that there's still no noticeable change, but I am getting smaller and smaller in my file size. We can take it clear down to 32, still no change, and I'm smaller. Take it clear down to 16, And I'm starting to notice, you may not notice in the video, but there's slight shifting. You'll probably notice it at 8. Watch once I shift to 8, you may have noticed a little shift, or down to 4. You can see a big shift at 4, clear down to 2. Obviously, this is only 2 colors being used. So once you notice a shift, you've gone too far. So when I went from 64 to 32, clear down to 16, then I start to notice a slight shift. So 16 is a little too far. I'll back up to 32. And this image is going to be saved at 1.4. And those same settings will also be applied to my W over here. So let's double click the zoom tool to zoom back out to 100%. So those ones are done. Now let's do the last couple here. So this image down here, we'll want to get our slice select tool, select this one, and we'll set this one up. Let's try this one as a ping 8 and see. It starts to lose a little bit inside of the word, so I would probably recommend going with a JPEG on here because it is a bitmap image, and we'll leave the quality at 70. And for this particular background here, notice I didn't slice this other one out because I didn't need to. We'll just use this same image down here for this one. So I'll select this image up here. This is going to be a ping 8 as well. And we'll put this up into the 32 color range. And that's probably pretty good. I would probably say 64 colors might be better for this because it does have a little bit more change in the gradients. So we'll leave that one at 64. And then lastly, we'll come over to this middle image and select it. And this image will do well as a JPEG because it has all this noise, it has gradients. So this is probably best off as a JPEG as well. If we were to make this a ping, it would probably give it a bigger file size. So we'll leave this one as JPEG 70. And that's everything. So now I have all of my slices have their particular compression algorithm set. And now I can come down here and click the save button. So I'm going to click save. Now it's going to ask me, what do I want to name this object here? Now you can kind of actually ignore this because it's not actually going to use this. As I mentioned in the last video, Photoshop will actually use the name of the slice as the file name, and you'll see that happen in just a second. You do want to pay attention to these settings down here. Now the format, we want to set to images only. I would rarely see an instance where you ever want to output HTML from Photoshop. It's just table based and it's quite atrocious. You'll never want to do that. Only images. And settings, you can leave this at the default settings. This is the main option you want to pay attention to. The default here is all slices, which I think is a poor choice. The default should be either user or selected slices. If I leave this to all slices, that means Photoshop is going to save every single one of these little gray images as an image as well. So it's going to create 20 or 30 random images that you'll have to go through and throw away. So don't leave it on all slices. You'll probably never use that. Instead, select user slices or selected slices. If I say all user slices, what that means is Photoshop will create every single blue slice. And if I say all selected slices, Photoshop will create whatever slices I had selected in here. So whatever slice that I had selected as brown, it will only save those images. Since I want to save them all at once, I'm going to say all user slices. Now, the next gotcha in this dialog box is I'm going to save all of these images inside of this folder I have created on my site root, or on my desktop called site root. And you'll notice that inside of this site root folder, I have a folder called images. There's nothing in it right now, but I've already prepared this. The mockup is the file we're currently working on, of course. And so what I want to do is, if I click the images, logically you would think, oh, I want to save these inside of my images folder. So you would select that first and then hit save. If you did this, you'd be wrong, because the way that Photoshop works is it will actually create another images folder inside of here and then put all your slices in there. So what it does is whatever directory you currently have selected, it looks to see if there is an existing images folder. If there is, it'll save the slices inside of there. If there isn't, it creates a new folder and then saves the slices inside of there. I find that a very odd behavior. I have no idea why that does that on its own. I think it's silly, but that's the way it works. So let's make sure we have the site root directory selected, because then it will automatically use that folder. And now we can finally click save. Photoshop hurry and does its thing. It's really quick. You can't really tell what happened, but let's go ahead and see if that worked. So I'm going to minimize Photoshop here. I'll open up that site root folder on my desktop. We'll navigate into the images folder, and sure enough, there's each one of my images. And let's come in here to, we'll just come into cover flow view. And you can see that this one's a JPEG, this one's a PNG, this one's a JPEG, 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 PNG, PNG. So it went ahead and saved out each one of those slices. Now you'll actually notice down here, one of them is called mockup_27. It has a funny name. And the reason that has a funny name is because I forgot to name that slice. So if I was to come into Photoshop and double click this, notice that I didn't name it. So this should be actually featured image -2 or whatever we call that, featured sidebar image. Hit OK. And so now I want to resave this one out, so I can say File, Save for Web. I could have easily just renamed the file in the operating system, but I prefer to make sure that the slice name is correct. So we'll come into here, and I'm just going to select only that particular slice and hit Save. And when this pops up, instead of saying all user slices, I'm only going to save the selected user slice. Make sure I have my site root selected and hit Save. And that should have just saved that slice. So let's come back in here and look. And there it is right there. So now I can just get this image, and I'm just going to throw this image in the trash because that's a throwaway one. So there's all the images, and each of them have their own compression. And our next step is to create our HTML and CSS wireframe and start to build the page.